And then we're going to kind of engage and talk a little bit about how Walmart is reacting to the situation and how other retailers are reacting as well. We're not going to have time to do an official Q&A during the session, but both gentlemen will be here afterwards, so if you want to come up and talk to them, feel free to do so. I'll be here too, but I know nobody's going to have any questions for me. So, but that's okay. I don't want you to know right now, I'm not offended. So Tom, why don't you start off and tell us a little bit about what we're dealing with.
Okay, sounds good. Is it working? All right, awesome. I'm going to stand up. I think I should have been a professor at a different, if I'd taken a different path, because I like to pace while I talk. And I know he said numbers, and I'm going to try and make this quick, hopefully not put you all back to sleep so early in the morning. But I do want to thank Rich also for coming out and doing this session with us. And I know you're all excited to hear from him, and so I'm going to be as quick as possible. So I promised him 10 minutes, so if I go past 10 minutes, go ahead and throw something at me, preferably something soft, like a shoe or Matt Seeley's golf swing, or something like that. So anyway, so today we're going to be talking about the Q2 data for organics. We do a OPN newsletter. If you haven't seen that, sign up for it. It's great. I might be a little biased. But we're going to be talking about basically organics or retail and going through a lot of these numbers. I'll go quick, but really quick. I know you can see this slide, but I'm going to read it to you anyway because that's apparently my job today. So the data is coming from Nielsen IQ, and I have to give a shout out to them. Thankful that we're a connected partner with them and that they allow us to use these data. We'll be talking about the produce department as a whole. So when we're talking about organics, that's what we're talking about is the produce department. Not just fruit and veg. There are some ancillary super categories that are part of that. So it is as defined by Nielsen. And then the time frame we're talking about is the most recent 13 weeks up to 6/25. That was the latest data that I could get my hands on in time to prepare for this session. And so when we talk about that, that's what I'm going to be considering Q2. And then we'll be talking about 5-year trends. And when I talk about that, it will be a comparison of that same 13 weeks for the last 5 years. And then just a couple of definitions of volume. When I talk about volume, I'm actually talking about equivalent pounds, not units, but actually using Nielsen's equivalent into pounds. And then YOY just stands for year over year. That's the comparison from last year. And then delta YOY, you change, okay? So let's get into this. Organics, Q2, $2.4 billion in sales, up 3.7%. Pretty good. Volume, 748 million pounds sold in organics in the produce department, but down 2.8%. Which is very shocking to even say that number after the years that we've been talking about organics. And the last metric that I want to bring up on this slide is distribution, percent ACV. So again, we're at 82.5% for Q2 2022, which is down 1.5 percentage points from Q2 of 2021, which is also kind of a shocker with all of the growth and the expansion that we've seen in organics. So looking at that 5-year trend, in dollars first, so again, this is the Q2 from 2018 all the way through. We see, dollars as a whole, the produce department is in the black numbers at the top, that it's basically trending up. Of course, Q2 2020, that was quarantine. That's the time that we all want to forget, so I won't talk about it too much. But there was a correction in produce, for 2021. But you can see the bottom kind of with this lighting of this. Anyway, also kind of black is the bottom, the organic, at 12% of the category. But in 2021, it up 3.9% despite a 2.5% decline in conventionals, right? Well, then we have dollars in 2021, and we see conventional is actually up 7.1%, where organic is only up 3.7%. So conventional actually outperforming organics. So when we look at volume in that 5-year trend, we actually see that it is continuing to kind of correct down from our anomaly period in 2020. And right now, conventional down 2%, which is actually the same as produce at the produce department. And then organics down 2.8%. So again, not performing as well as conventional. So what is driving this? One thing that I will be talking about actually a lot today is that not every category is the same. You can't talk about generalities. Like we're going to talk, a lot at that high level, right, today. And every single category can be different. Your business is different than even that generality and what's happening with inflation. Yes, it kind of affects us, but it's actually affecting us different, and there's so many different variables. So I can't go through every single category today, but I want to bring out just a couple of points of some categories that are driving that trend, organic, actually performing less than conventional right now. And the first one has to be blueberries. Organic blueberries down 23.5% year over year for Q2, compared to the conventional counterpart at only 2.1%. So huge difference between conventional and organic, right? And so you could say, wow, yeah, that's inflation. That's all that's driving that. And you'll find that that's not actually the case. But another one that's driving this trend is organic apples, down 10% year over year, and conventional apples actually up 3.1%. And so you actually see that full swing between organic and conventional. So it kind of starts to tell that story of, hey, maybe inflation is really hurting organics. But then we get to the categories that are actually bucking the trend. And we have to bring out organic tomatoes. Now, organic tomatoes only represent 5% of the category. Overall, produce department is 12%, but up almost 20% year over year for Q2, where their conventional counterpart basically flat at a 0.3% difference, but definitely bucking that trend. So again, we're talking about there's more variables than just inflation at place here, or in play here. And then organic mushrooms represents 11% of the mushroom category, so fairly solid with the rest of produce. Down only 1.3% in volume, where conventional mushrooms down 8.5%. So again, one of those categories that are beckoning the trend. And if you look across all of the categories, half of them are driving the trend and half of them aren't. And so it's really interesting. And again, when we talk, it's important that you go back and you look at your business and you drive, look into those numbers to understand, what you need to do. But we are going to be talking about inflation, so I have to lay these numbers out so that we have something to talk about. So you can see on the what side is that? Is that right? Right? Conventional is also going up in price every single year, and this is like this average price per pound, right, for the entire produce department. So it's not just that retailers are raising the prices, but maybe the package is changing, the assortment is changing, you have more value add. There's a lot of things that can be going into this number. So again, don't take this down, back to home office and say, this is what we need to do because this was the number. But you can see that there's a trend up on average price, both in conventional and organic. But for Q2 2022, you see conventionals are actually up 9.3%, according to Nielsen, and then organic is up 7.2%. And so huge jump in price, and we all knew that. That's not earth-shattering news to anybody. But the interesting thing is you see the gap. You see, those bars for conventional and then that huge jump over to the organic side. And so what's really interesting is when you start to look at that gap, even though the prices are actually all going up, the gap between conventional and organic is still decreasing. So in Q2 of 2018, the overall average sale price of organics for the produce department was 107% of the conventional, so double that price. Now in Q2 of 2022, that's a lot of twos. Q2 of 2022. Anyway, is 88%, so it's continuing to decline. And I'm of the opinion, that it's important to have this gap. And again, every category, every business is a little different. But, we have retailers that want to push that price of organics down to parity with conventional. And I don't think that's right. I don't think it needs to go there. And so I think that's something else that we'll have a bit of a discussion about. But it is important to find where that gap is and make sure that you are competitive. And so I'm going to stop there. If you want these slides, there's my email address right there. I'm happy to send them out. But at this point, I'll turn the time back over to you, Kevin.
Cool, thank you. It seems like one of the things that I've talked to a lot of retailers in the past few months, and all of whom are just totally having their rear ends kicked by inflation in so many different ways. And the ones I talk to, because we're talking about it. I mean, it's funny. We had the pandemic, and now we got inflation, and everybody seems to agree that it seems incredibly likely that in a fairly short period of time, then we're going to be dealing with recession. We were joking about this at one point, and one of you said, yeah, what's next? Aphids? Aphids. I said locusts. They said, no, aphids would be much worse for this industry. So there's something to look forward to.
They're already here.
That's the problem.
No, those of you in the lettuce deal, especially here, know what I'm talking about.
But do you think we're already, are the facts on the ground that everybody's dealing with in terms of inflation made worse by the fact that people are also dealing already with a recessionary mindset? That we're not in recession yet technically, but in terms of the reality of what people are dealing with, people are already acting like we are. I mean, is that true in terms of how you see your customers reacting and how you're reacting to them?
Good morning, first of all. And I'm just going to make a clarification because we don't release until another month. I'm not going to talk about Q2. Everything I'm talking about is really through year to date and up to about Q1. So anything you can infer, but just don't make any decisions, buying or selling decisions based on that. I think, yes, I would go back to April. And I would go back to February and March and say that the consumer behavior was already changing. And I think we saw people giving up subscriptions. We saw people trading up and trading down for meals. In some cases, we started to see a shift. And I'm not going to say I know all the details on the food service retail number, but there's definitely a premium of the eat out. And we saw that happen where people would start to shift to home food and cooking at home and really starting to make choices about what they buy. So as far as a recession, I don't know that that's super relevant they're already feeling inflation. And when we look at America, you have a subset of what we would call, price sensitive, mid-market and upmarket. And when we think about that group of people, those people in the mid-market and the price sensitive group, that's about 80, 85, 90%, right? There's a lot of people in that subset. They're already feeling this. So inflation's been around for a while, at least especially in this, when we talk about in this current environment, and they're already making choices about how they buy. Whether they're shifting into packaged or shifting into frozen or different channels or buying down and doing different things to feed their family. So inflation's here. I don't know that they're going to make any different decisions because of a recession. These people are already dealing with day-to-day living and trying to manage their day-to-day budgets.
Well, I think, along with that though, I mean, most likely there's going to be a correction, right? And recession, what is that? It's basically, there's a couple of different things that can bring us into a recession. Inflation is one of those, but it's all about curbing spending, but it's normally on a high level. It's housing, it's cars, it's big ticket items, things like that. So basically our GDP is going down, right? And that's what causes a recession. The interesting thing though, I think in the produce department is it doesn't make a lot of difference if we're in a inflationary period or if we're in a recession. Because the consumer is basically worried about their pocketbook, and I think what's happened. I mean, you were joking about gas prices, right? I mean, it's been there so long now that people are really starting to feel that in their wallet, and so when they go to the grocery store or who they choose to shop with, and we can talk about foot traffic and what that means between retailers, but. That's already starting to happen, and they're making those choices because their wallet is really getting pinched. And so when we talk about organic and conventional, which we're supposed to be talking about, I think today, right? Talking about organic and conventional. So when we talk about that, that is one of those things. There's a very large percentage of the consumer that I call fence sitters. They may purchase organic, they may go to conventional, depending on a couple of different. Attributes. Quality is an important one. Price is obviously is a big one. I just was talking about that gap, right, and making sure that you have a competitive advantage. It doesn't have to be identical to conventional in order for somebody to go to organic, but at the same time, it has to be compelling. And so that's something that as they're making those decisions and as they're making their grocery list, if they're going to go to organic, there has to be that compelling story on why am I doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you showed it in the chart. 2020, when it was available and there was a clear drive to manage your health and whatever it is that consumers were doing to try and offset potential risks, we saw a jump in organics, and I think that's the same thing. So the upside is there in the market, but I think, and if I could get a shout out from all the red badges and retailers, it's really about supply. And I think if you look at those numbers, a lot of what we see up there are functions of supply. So whether there's a blueberry gap or there's a problem with Thanksgiving and mushrooms and all those type of things that happen in the normal course of this commodity or this subset, I think for us, the more supply we get, the more upside there really is.
Right.
Just at this point, the trade down is around moving into categories that are more shelf stable, even within the produce department, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just so we're clear, when Tom was showing us all those numbers and talking about different categories, is that pretty much consistent with your experience? I mean, was there anything there you saw and said, nah, it's a little different for us?
No, I mean, yeah, of course, it's pretty consistent. I think the supply shocks hit everybody equally, right?
I'm still unclear. You were comparing blueberries with tomatoes, right? Mm-hmm. And how they operate differently. But I'm unclear, and maybe I'm just thick. Why is that? Why do some categories react? Why are people reacting differently with some categories than others?
Sure. Yeah, no, I would think we would have to get an organic blueberry supplier up here and an organic tomato supplier up here, and I'm sure they would say, oh, well, we were able to grow this many more tomatoes, and we had, this house, and a hothouse all of a sudden came up with some organics, and there was just more supply or something like that, or there's a drop in price. There's some other drivers other than inflation that really pushed organic tomatoes, and the fact that it was only 5% of the total category where produce is at 12%, right? So it's a little not yet established category in tomatoes, which is actually kind of surprising, where blueberries is at 12%, exactly what the produce department is. And I know for a fact that they've struggled with supply, and so it's not just inflation. You can't say, oh, well, people just didn't want to buy organic blueberries. Well, there was actually, like you were just talking about, there's some sourcing issues, and it also caused prices to be raised even more than, what 9.3%, gain in pricing. So I think there's just so many variables that go into it.
You have to double click on every category for sure. I mean, tomatoes, I
like that double click.
Yeah, the Romas, maybe Romas are going, the beefsteaks are going down, but you're moving into the hothouse of grapes, the cherries, all this stuff that, that potentially the consumers are starting to make a choice on around snacking and that too. So
that's right.
So what does a retailer do in this situation in terms of if you're having, you've clearly said, listen, the more supply we get, the better off we are, okay? Mm-hmm. But in terms of dealing with your mix in the produce department, because there are going to be categories where you're going to have an issue with supply, and the other categories where you're not, to what extent does a retailer then need to adjust the mix to compensate for that? And how far down the road can you look to say, hey, 3 months from now, our produce department may look different because we recognize these supply chain issues are going to happen.
I mean, unpacking that's the whole bunch of levels about how we sell, where we sell to the consumer, whether you're looking at online or whether you're looking at in store, what regions, things like that. But I think for us, it really is about the consistency of supply will help drive merchant choices. And so if your merchants are comfortable and realize that they're going to get a consistent supply of grape tomatoes throughout the course of the year, they may only list that item. And again, it depends on your market, depends on your store, your format. But in most cases, if we have the opportunity to provide a consistent supply of one particular subset, we're starting to do that even in our world of trading into just taking only an organic item. The club business does that because they've got definitely different senses of different SKU counts, but for us, it's really about space and availability, right? So we'll allocate the space if we have the consistent supply.
But we also don't want to be so reactionary, and especially now, like we've now had 3 years where we're all worried about what's right here, right? We're not even looking, 2-3 years down the road because we're all worried about what's happening right here. Mm-hmm. And with retailers, it shouldn't be a knee-jerk reaction because this is going to change once again. And so, if you're all of a sudden switching up your entire assortment, and let's take some, I won't name them, but some retailers that really rely on higher price points, right? And they go for that quality, they go for a little higher premium pack and product. Right now, they're suffering, right? And that foot traffic is going to somewhere, like Walmart. So should Walmart all of a sudden start stocking all those premium items because they know that some of these people are now switching and coming into their store? It may be a little bit, But, or should the retailer, that worries about high price point and making sure they have a premium assortment, should they all of a sudden start dropping and going value add? I don't think so, because again, this is reactionary, and we need to make sure that we're kind of understanding what's happening and what's going, down the road. One other stat, if I can, really quick. I didn't bring this up because I was really trying to keep it 10 minutes because I knew people would start falling asleep. But one of the other things I like to look at is SKU count. And looking at how many SKUs are actually in the produce department at any given time and what that trend is. And for the first time ever in Q2 2022, organic SKU count was down by 2%. That's never happened. There's always been more and more SKUs in organic, every single year for as long as I can remember. And so to see that SKUs are actually down, there's opportunity because everybody is worrying about right here instead of thinking about, so innovation, these retailers need it more than ever. And so, I think that it's ripe, So.
And I mean, you look at the tomatoes too, 90% of those are grown inside of a hothouse, right? The controlled environment, the environment that has a little less variability. I mean, we still need the sun, but I think when you start to look at how things are being produced, I think that's going to start driving organic traffic as well too. So
yeah, absolutely.
And I would say, who was it that I ran into Frida, and she was talking about turmeric. And there's a long tail of items, even though the SKU count may be different. If you're an Apple supplier, I mean, there's 500 Apple SKUs. So, you drop those down, which, no offense, I love them all.
But we're sponsored by Domex.
They're all great. Believe me, they're all great. And I want them all. But
you better watch what you say there.
Exactly.
No, but I don't think you have to worry about it. You're Walmart. They're going to sell to you
Domex,
no matter what you say.
With anybody from Domex here, I'm sure somebody's going to be here. Robert will be calling me. But the point is that, there is a long tail of items developing, whether we look at organic bananas, organic turmeric, organic garlic, organic mangoes. All of those tails are starting to grow too. So I think there's a rising tide here that could potentially lift all boats.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something you just said, though, Tom, because you said that people don't want to be companies don't want to be too reactive, and yet it seems to me that one of the things that the current environment creates is an opportunity for retailers, let's say like a Walmart, since you're here, to say, hey, listen, the retailers that you were talking about, the high-end retailers who may in certain cases have priced themselves out of the market just because of inflation, and they have a percentage of customers who no longer can spend that money on the organic produce that they're selling. It's an opportunity for a company like Walmart to come in and quite frankly steal some market share and then try and keep it. And not just Walmart, but any retailer who's not in that upper 10% that you were talking about. So this actually, it seems to me, again, if you can get supply and you can keep your numbers sharp, this is a great opportunity for retailers to say, hey, listen, let's expand on organics. Let's try and steal some market share from those higher end retailers. Is that a fair way to look at the market?
Yeah, I mean, we want to give the customer what they want. So in a particular geography, a customer may skew heavily towards conventional potatoes versus organic cherries, right? And so I think there's a difference in all of that and how you play. For us, as we look at our online space, we know that even though it may not be super heavily penetrated at this point, it may not ever get to a point where it's 40%. I think the UK's been online grocery for many years and still only in that low 20s or low mid double digits, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So I think when we look at our space, if we start to think about how do we try and attract new customers into the space, it's organics is one thing, but we think about how they want to shop, which is online, which is pickup, which is also in store. So when we drive to a particular channel, we know that the online consumer does skew more heavily to organics. So we might want to look at how we make an offering in that space and in a particular region and geography that will be, that will facilitate that sort of sale. At the same time, we have to cater to the in-store customer and traffic, which is still a significant portion of what we do, right?
Yeah.
So it's really about trying to find the balance.
Yeah, I think promotion goes into that too.
Yeah.
Right? Making sure that we understand, because again, moms out there, not just moms, but that's kind of something that we focus on a lot. But they're looking how to feed their children, how to get healthy, items for their children. But they're also watching, the bank balance and everything else, and so they're looking for promotions. And one of the things I think on e-commerce is it's actually a little harder to see what's on promo and what's not. You walk into a store and you walk, the aisle, you know exactly, what the price. You can make those comparisons very, very quickly. And online, it's just not that easy.
No, but we're getting better at banners and
yes,
things like
absolutely.
that. I mean, it's a tough space for us for sure. I mean, we're second to the party, third to the party, and we're trying to accelerate that for sure. But trying to get a banner up online when the customer clicks in, trying to even do simple things like saying, can I search EBT or Snap? I mean, can those things come up and start bringing those kind of algorithms to bring that product up? Yeah. I think there's a potential for us to be able to do that better.
Right.
And we're EDLC. We try and not, obviously we try and keep the same price all year round. Or keep the customer understanding that our price is the lowest price possible. But there are times where we can take advantage of opportunity buys, or if there's a long deal. I think we had some great grape sales this year. Obviously, as cherries are up, extremely expensive, we had grapes that had some supply. So we went ahead and tried to give what we're calling a rollback to our customers. So in those times, yeah, there is a way for us to message to the consumer, and if you're on promotions or you run those type of things, it's awesome. It's a great way to do it. I think the ultimate goal is to get this into the hands of the consumer.
Yeah. So going off of that, though, with promotion on organics, I have a question for you. Can I ask you a question?
You can ask it.
Is that
Yes.
okay? All right, good.
But it better be in the script, dude.
I know, yeah, I was gonna say.
I mean, if it's not in the script,
If they haven't figured out that
what
we're
would
not
these people have
scripted.
thought of if I said, no, you can't ask him a question, that's mine?
Exactly.
I know. I think they figured out we're not scripted at all. No, now I forgot my question. No, so
That's why I have mine
we
written
train
down.
on this stuff. We train on this stuff. Don't worry about
Oh boy, we're off the rails. So organics and promotions. Organics, normally when you put something on promotion that's organic, you don't get the lift that you do with, they say, a stable conventional item, right? In a time like this, with inflation, trying to get maybe, I'm sure these people want to sell more organics. What would you talk about promotion a little bit with their organics? Is that something that, they would look at doing? Knowing that, most of the time when you put an organic on promotion versus a staple item, and Walmart, you do not put a lot of things on promotion, just like you were talking about. Your circular is pretty small compared to a lot of others. Filling time so that he can get his answer figured out here.
No, I don't know that I have a good answer for that.
Yeah.
I think every retailer is different, and
Yeah.
their customer base is different. But I think it's about communication between you and your supplier. And I think the more you can tell us if you're getting into a period of time where you see something coming up that's going to be, excess or could potentially be a great deal for the consumer, the more we want to know that, as every retailer would, because we have the opportunity to capture sales and market share and all that other stuff. So
you're saying suppliers should communicate with retailers
Yes, I
on
think
what they
suppliers
have.
should communicate with retailers. Absolutely.
Write that down.
I was going to say, that's such a radical notion.
Well, just tell it. I mean, but the problem is we get so focused on the short term, right? And
Yeah.
the challenge is to make sure that we're thinking about either the crop cycle or beyond that, right? And
That's right.
And there are things structurally that you have to do to make sure that you're prepared for the next 2 and 3 years to be able to give the consumer what they want, whether it's online or whether it's in store. So I think for us, how do we manage that? The short term, there's a lot of tactical stuff in produce which is never going to go away, despite what my bosses think. It's always going to be a little element of tactical, but there's also that mid-range and crop cycle, and I think the more we can get ahead on the crop cycle, which is anywhere 50 to 150 days depending on the crop and region, but when we start to think about it in terms of that, that's where we start to open a window and a better horizon, a better benefit for the consumer.
Yeah. Well
You guys both brought up online, which I wasn't planning on talking about, but it's interesting to me that you seem to both be saying that it's harder to make a price argument online than it is in store. I think you said that, right?
Well, it's harder to make a comparison.
It's hard.
Right?
So that would be, someone who shops a lot online, I'm surprised you'd say that. I find it very easy online to compare prices.
Up to a certain extent, though, because you can only see so many things on your screen at a time, and the algorithms that you talk about bring certain things up to the top.
The question I want to ask is, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Are you really going to look up the difference between an apple and an apple? You might look up the difference between a dishwasher and a dishwasher, but I think online becomes a research tool in some categories where clearly they're using online as a research and a way to find it. But when we talk about produce and the frequency of the buy, I think we're not spending as much time. I don't. I think I'm thinking about where do I usually shop? Where am I going to go to get 80% of my other items? And that's where I'm going now. If it's 10 cents more, 5 cents less, But I will notice over time if my grocery bill's higher when I shop at X retailer or Y retailer.
Yeah. And by the way, your list now, because you already shopped there once, that comes up to the top, right? And so it's really easy to repurchase. So how do you get these new items into that cart on e-commerce? And so, again, I think e-commerce is amazing. Too much information about myself. I have 5 kids. My wife loves it, right? I mean, it's been an absolute savior. She's actually happy for once, with me because. Knock it off.
Now we know way too much.
I told you that was too much information.
Which is apparently your wife's computer makes her happier than you do. I don't know what
There's truth to that. There's truth
Not
to
touching
that.
that either.
But with that, I mean, it's really important actually that she has that ability to do that. And when pickup came available, back she was an early adopter, and she loves it, and now delivery is there, and it's phenomenal for her, and for us, because then she's happy with me.
And the delivery, I'm just going to pound on that too.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to an associate of ours who in Bentonville, we have all kinds of different forms. We're testing the automated deliveries and that. But he said, Joel, you actually do this? He said, man, it's great. The guy has the code to my garage. He comes in, he clicks the deal, he puts it in my refrigerator in the garage, and I don't even touch it.
Yeah.
And by the way, I can do that 3 or 4 times a week, so my trip patterns are changing. My waste is down. There's a lot of things that we think, we've always thought that consumers, and we still do, believe that they shop with their eyes, but it is shifting, and there's going to be a subset of the market that will be in that sort of channel versus in store picking
Yeah,
up.
I think though in produce though, it is a little different. Like we've been burned quite a few times, with having produce delivered, and so a lot of times,
Hopefully
especially.
not by us. Let us know. You know my number, dude. Call me.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
That was a clarification. For the
I'll tell you a
recording.
story sometime. No, but we have been burned a couple of times, and so there are certain items that she just will not put in that grocery pickup anymore because we feel that we need to get it, and especially now where we're trying to cut that waste. We definitely do not want to throw it away, and so making sure that it's as fresh as possible. It's driving us to the store for produce more than anything else.
I mean, it's fair. Do you want a green banana or a yellow banana? Do you want a hard peach? I got you.
But isn't that the sort of thing? And we're going down. We're
I know,
going
we're
down
rabbit
a
hole
here.
here.
Road here.
Strange.
It's your job.
But isn't
man.
that one of the? But you guys are having so much fun. But isn't that one of the things that retailers that I've talked to who are in the produce business and also online? They say it's one of the places where they actually they are tested. That's where the tests take place, right? If you ask for a green banana and you get a yellow banana, or you ask for an organic tomato and you get a conventional tomato, that's where you judge the retailer on their ability to deliver.
Yeah.
Right?
Substitutions, and we call them substitutions, no
Right.
picks. Those are a whole new set of metrics that we never looked at 3 years ago, right? Yeah.
But it seems to me this is actually an opportunity, again, to get back to the idea of opportunity, because you have so much more data on the customers who are shopping online than you necessarily do with the customers who are coming in the store, right?
I think with the apps and a lot of the pickup and the scan and go type things, we're getting more data in the store. I would say in general, yes.
In general, yeah, right? So you can actually start to say to somebody, if somebody is shopping only organic produce and you have that data on them, you can then actually use your algorithms then to try to sell them to upsell them to organics from conventionals, right? You can say, okay, they're buying this, but they're not buying that, and you can start to address those. What you may see in the gaps in their buying patterns to sort of sell them stuff they weren't getting before. They weren't buying from you. They may have been buying from somebody else.
I think you give us too much credit, but yeah, that's our intention. That's what we want to do, right?
Well, giving you too much credit in the sense that you're not doing it yet, but you could do that.
Yeah, I think it's about still customer choice, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't know that we're going to necessarily present and try and upsell. I think if the pattern and the algorithm says that this consumer typically buys organic and plus another set of complementary items that are organic, then we will show that to the consumer because that's what they want.
I was fascinated by. Go ahead. You were going to.
No. Go ahead.
I was fascinated by the numbers, and as somebody who's not in the produce business, and I recognize I'm like one of the few people in the room who's not. The fact that organic produce almost never has never gotten really above that 12% number. I mean, it was fascinating to me in those quarterly comparisons that it never really gets above 12%. So I guess I want to ask, in a time of inflation, possibly moving into recession, a lot of economic difficulties, we don't know where things are going. I mean, is it still, what has to be done to get it beyond those numbers? What is it good? Can you get it to 20? Can you get it to 25?
I think so. I mean, I think there will be a ceiling at some point. And actually, back when this was a long, long time ago when organics were really starting to come into play, and you saw that conventional, actually, growers, they started to really watch what they were putting on their crops and things like that. And it actually, organic helped the entire industry, at that point, because it really did bring some things to light. And organic is still very, very important. And at that point, I actually thought at some point it would all become just this natural, right? And there would be no conventional or organic. And now I know that I was completely wrong. And that's the only time I've ever been wrong in my life. But I think
we could ask your wife about that.
I should have never brought that up. No, but organic plays an important part, and it's a huge, for retailers, it's a huge upsell, and it's something that has to be there. We can't go back, and I believe there is still opportunity to go forward. Can we go forward in the next 6 months to a year? It really depends on a lot of variables. But as long as gas prices are where they are, the housing rates are, and interest rates are where they are, it's going to be a tough row to hoe, for our organic grower shippers, sadly, But there are things that we can do, and again, going back to one of the very first things that Rich said is sourcing, making sure that it's available. And for that right price. I'm not saying drop your price, to that conventional level, but at the same time, look at where the conventionals are and figure out what that gap should be. Because that's really, really important to make sure that you have that story. They understand why that organic is important to them, and then make sure that it's at a price point that they're going, yeah, I think I can jump up to that, So that's how we get past 12%.
I
think the same thing. I think there's a long-term cost curve play too. I mean, you think about fertilizer costs, you think about those things. As long as we can offset some of the yield differentials, which are getting better with the newer varieties, I think there could be a point where there's some parity between the two. I think technology is going to help us a lot.
I still think that it seems to me from, again, looking at it from my perspective, is while yes, moments of economic difficulty create challenges in terms of growing a category where you said 88%, it's largely 80% right now, while the differential is less than it's ever been, it's still 88%, right? Right. Mm-hmm. So there are some inherent challenges there. But in a category where it seems to me there is a passionate belief that it is better than, people in the organic business believe passionately that their product is better, has greater value, may not be cheaper, but greater value than conventionals, that this is an opportunity through, through promotion, through savvy marketing, through targeted marketing to consumers, and by companies that are more maybe price oriented, using the opportunity to steal market share from the higher end retailers, that this is actually an opportunity to drive sales and to drive a share of stomach, share of market more to organics.
Oh yeah.
Oh, totally.
Yeah,
go back to that same chart, that 2020, right? Their aspirational number. There is a huge subset of people who are aspirational. We look at, again, price sensitive, mid-market, up-market. And the mid-market is a huge selection of the deal. I mean, it's over 50%. We'll call it 50 to 60%. You add in the price sensitive, you're hitting 85, 90%. But when we look at that mid-market, and the price sensitive people, they're going to be price sensitive forever. But as we look at mid-market, which is a huge subset, we're seeing that they actually over-indexed it. They want more organics. That maybe they can't afford it, or maybe they're making choices in their thing, or maybe it's not available, right? So that mid-market segment, whatever, which is everybody's customer, doesn't matter which retailer you are, the mid-market is you're touching them. They want organics and they want more of it. So how do we get them more of it in a way that is cost effective and they can manage it? Yeah, consistently.
Yeah, and part of that is, something I need to trademark this, but it's called display and pray. It's what we do in produce with new items. We sell it to a retailer and we say, this is going to be great, and retailer, put this on your shelf, and then we pray that somebody actually finds it. And I mean, those days are over, right? Like we can't do that. We have to start to become true marketers and really get our message out, especially with organics and right now, get our message out to the consumer. Make sure that they know that it's on the shelf and where to go get it, and why they should go get it. You know, and sadly, you know, I've been in the produce industry for 20 plus years, right? And that's how we've always done it. We don't pay for our space on the shelf like other, commodities do in CPG. And so we don't really, we hope that the retailer does it for us. We pray that the retailer does it for us instead of us going directly to the consumer. And I think that those times have changed, and it's time for them, us, to really get out there and talk to the consumer directly.
Yeah, and there is plenty of opportunity for that, especially as we start to even build out our online infrastructure. We're touching a lot of people every day.
Yeah.
So there is a place, I think, where we can start sending that message more consistently to the consumer.
Yeah.
Well, certainly in the case of Walmart, I mean, when we were talking on the phone in advance, I mean, you said, listen, we are America, right? There's a Walmart near virtually everybody,
90%
right? 90% of the population.
Right.
And so, I mean,
within 5 miles.
Within 5 miles, and so this is an opportunity for you guys, but also for other retailers, right? Because they have different issues and different demands. But it seems to me this has the potential of being a kind of a move the needle moment if people take advantage of it. I keep thinking that a phrase that we're going to hear from a lot of retailers over the next 6 months or so, and we're all going to get sick, I'm going to get sick of it, maybe you will too, is a lot of retailers are going to say, it's time to get back to fundamentals, right? Which makes me nuts, because if they're not doing the fundamentals right now, then forget it, you shouldn't be in business. This is the time but I think this is an opportunity to build on fundamentals, and if you don't have the fundamentals right, retire. Sell your store, because it's not a time where you can. This is not the time to kind of get back to fundamentals.
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah, I mean, so if you don't know the history, Sam Walton was a pilot, and he flew around, and that's how a lot of these stores got set up, was he'd fly around and say, we put a store there, put a store there. So there's a lot of that pilot culture within our organization. And what we've been talking about is, when you think about turbulence, when you're flying, and many of you may have flown here, when you think about turbulence and you think about what a pilot does during turbulence, right? What do? They don't slow down, they don't run to the bathroom, whatever, maybe they do, but the reality is they accelerate, right? And so when we're thinking about this time, and you talked a little bit about, that was your analogy yesterday around accelerating around a turn, but when we think about a pilot and turbulence, they accelerate through the turbulence, and that's what our intention is right now. We have to execute the basics, but we've also got to, we also have to really start accelerating some of these longer range programs and investments.
That was a really good analogy. I like
Yeah,
it. Can
well,
steal
I don't
that?
make this stuff up. They give it. There's like a whole set of scripts.
Oh, okay. I was giving you so much credit.
No,
Rich.
actually, I mean, actually, it was your analogy
Well,
yesterday.
the
It was
metaphor
you.
that I used in conversation yesterday was that about 15, 16 years ago, I took race car driving lessons.
Yeah, that's right.
And I found out that I was a really lousy race car driver because I was in my early 50s. I had a mortgage and 3 kids. I came to a curve, I wanted to slow down. I'm racing against 20-year-olds who think they're bulletproof, so they just did whatever they wanted to do. But the guy who was teaching me the lesson, and this will be our final thought for today, said, listen, the important thing is when you come to a curve is you want to accelerate. You want to accelerate, you want to hit it at the right angle, because that's when you can go past your opposition. And in terms of this business, and for the sake of this discussion, the organic produce business, the opposition, the ones who are slowing down, are the ones who are saying, let's get back to fundamentals. If people in this industry say, no, this is a time we're going to accelerate, sometimes you're going to change your altitude, and we're going to use your analogy, right? Your metaphor. You go above, try and go above it and do it, come at it a different way. That's how you succeed, even in a time of economic hardship. So we are out of time. Join me in giving these guys a round of applause. You were terrific.
Thank you.